In a galaxy far beyond Earth, there existed a massive empire of alien species known as the Xerec Coalition. The Xerecs controlled hundreds of planets and had enslaved countless species. Their technology was far beyond anything Earth could imagine, and their cruelty was known across the cosmos. For centuries, they had kept humans in check, believing them to be nothing more than primitive, insignificant creatures. But they were wrong. On a small, forgotten planet called Earth, a human named Jake was living a life that was, to most, ordinary. Jake was just a man who worked a regular job, lived in a small town, and had big dreams of exploring the stars. He had no idea that his life was about to change forever. His world, so familiar and quiet, was on the verge of being turned upside down, not by something of this planet, but by something from deep within the stars. The Xerec Coalition had been watching Earth for years. They saw humans as a threat, but not one that needed immediate attention. Earth was small, isolated, and primitive. So, for a long time, they had done nothing, until Jake appeared. Jake had unknowingly stumbled onto a secret, one that the Xerecs had hoped would never be discovered. While working as a mechanic in a small, dusty repair shop, Jake came across an ancient artifact buried beneath the ground. It was small, metal, and covered in strange symbols. At first, it seemed like nothing more than a forgotten relic, a piece of junk left over from an age-long past. But Jake's curiosity led him to investigate further, and what he uncovered was far more dangerous than he could ever have imagined. The artifact was a key to a power that the Xerecs had tried to keep hidden for centuries. It was an ancient source of energy, one capable of reshaping the very fabric of the universe. The Xerecs knew that if the humans ever unlocked its potential, they would become a force unlike any the universe had ever seen. The power could turn the tide of galactic wars, and the Xerecs were not about to let that happen. That was when they decided Jake had to be eliminated. A group of elite Xerec soldiers, known for their ruthlessness and efficiency, was dispatched to Earth. Their mission was simple: find Jake, capture him, and destroy the artifact. They didn't care about the planet, the people, or the consequences. Earth was a minor inconvenience in their larger plans. But Jake, he had to be silenced before humanity could ever realize their true potential. The Xerec soldiers landed on Earth quietly, their cloaked ships hidden high above the atmosphere. They made their way to Jake's small town under the cover of darkness. No one suspected a thing. The humans were too naive, too unaware of the cosmic dangers lurking just beyond their reach. Jake had no idea what was coming for him. It was an ordinary evening when the Xerec soldiers arrived. Jake was at home, sitting in his small apartment, working on his latest project, a car engine he'd been trying to fix for weeks. The noise of his wrench hitting metal was the only sound in the otherwise quiet room. He was lost in his work, thinking about the future and how, one day, he would leave Earth behind and explore the stars, just like he had always dreamed. But outside, hidden in the shadows, the Xerec soldiers were closing in. They had tracked him down, and there was no turning back. The leader of the Xerec soldiers, a cold and calculating figure named Vorek, gave the order. "Find him," he said in a low, harsh voice, "and make it quick." Jake had just finished tightening a bolt when he heard a noise outside his window. He didn't think much of it at first. Maybe it was just a stray animal or the wind moving the branches of the tree. But then the sound grew louder, and before he could react, a figure appeared in his doorway. It was tall, humanoid, but not human. The creature's skin was a dark, glossy gray, and its eyes glowed with an unnatural blood-red light. The alien stepped forward, a weapon in its hand. Jake froze. He had never seen anything like it before. Who are you?" Jake stammered, trying to back away. "You are Jake, the human who discovered the artifact," the Xerec soldier hissed. "You have something that does not belong to you." Before Jake could speak, the soldier raised his weapon. A blast of energy shot out, and Jake felt a sharp pain in his chest as he was thrown back against the wall. He collapsed to the floor, unable to move. The world around him spun, his vision blurring. For a moment, everything went black. Somewhere far away, within the halls of the Xeric Empire's command center, Vorik received the news. Mission complete, one of the soldiers reported. The human is dead. The artifact is secured. Vorik nodded slowly. Good. Bring it to me. The artifact, the key to untold power, was in the hands of the Xeric Empire now. They could keep it hidden, locked away, where no one could ever find it again. But that wasn't the end of the story. No, far from it. What the Xerics didn't know was that they had just made a terrible mistake. They had killed Jake, yes, but they had also triggered something much older, something far more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. Back on Earth, as Jake's body lay cold and lifeless on the floor of his apartment, something extraordinary began to happen. In the deepest reaches of space, in the heart of a long-forgotten galaxy, ancient forces stirred. The universe, vast and unknowable, had its own rules. Rules that the Xeracs were not aware of. You see, humanity was not just another species to be wiped away or controlled. Humans were different. They were connected to something much greater, something that even the Xeracs feared. Jake had unknowingly awakened this power the moment he found the artifact. He had unlocked a door, a cosmic threshold that no one, not even the most advanced civilizations, could ever have imagined. The power that flowed from the artifact was not just an ancient technology. It was the heart of a forgotten civilization, a civilization that had once protected humanity from the forces of darkness. And now, with Jake's death, the universe was about to respond. Far above Earth, the Xeric fleet continued its operations, believing their task was complete. They were wrong. Far beyond their reach, deep within the cosmic ether, the universe was preparing to react to the death of one single human. The consequences of that simple act would soon shake the very foundations of the galaxy itself. In the quiet of his apartment, Jake's body began to stir. It wasn't a resurrection, not in the way the Xerics understood life and death. What was happening was far stranger, far more profound. The artifact had bonded with Jake's soul, and now, as the ancient forces awakened, so too did Jake. His fingers twitched. His chest rose and fell, slowly at first, then more rapidly. His eyes snapped open, glowing faintly with a light that had never been there before. Jake was alive. And the Xeracs, who had thought they could erase humanity from existence, were about to learn just how wrong they were. Jake's eyes snapped open. The pain in his chest, the weight of death that had gripped him only moments before, seemed to vanish. For a moment, he didn't know where he was or how he had gotten here. His thoughts were clouded, and his body felt different, strange, as if it wasn't entirely his own anymore. The room around him, his small apartment, looked the same, yet something had shifted. The air seemed thicker, charged with a kind of energy he couldn't comprehend. He tried to sit up, but his body felt heavy, like an invisible force was pressing down on him. Yet at the same time, he could feel something pulsing inside him. Something powerful, ancient. It wasn't just in his body, it was in his very being. A connection to something much larger, much older than anything he could ever have imagined. His chest burned with the remnants of the blast that had killed him, but now it was different. The pain was gone, replaced by a warmth that spread outward, like the sun rising after a long night. Outside the window, the world continued as normal. People went about their business, oblivious to the cosmic forces now stirring beneath the surface. The aliens who had killed him, who thought they had succeeded in erasing him, had no idea what they had just unleashed. In the cold, distant void of space, their actions had triggered something far beyond their control, a ripple in the universe that would soon come crashing down on them. Jake didn't fully understand what was happening, but he could feel it. He could feel the universe itself reacting to his death and resurrection. It was as if the very fabric of reality had shifted, and in its wake, something ancient and powerful was waking up. The air in the room was electric, and with every breath Jake took, he felt stronger, more connected to something greater. He stood up, his legs trembling slightly, unsure of what exactly was happening, but there was no time to dwell on it. His mind flashed to the Zerek soldiers who had killed him. The memory of their red, glowing eyes, the cold, emotionless faces of the aliens, it all came rushing back to him. They had murdered him, thinking that would be the end of it. But it was far from over. What they didn't know was that Jake was not the same human they had killed. The artifact, the one they had so desperately wanted to destroy, had bonded with him, unlocking something much more than just its energy. It had connected him to something far beyond the reach of the Zereks. As he stumbled toward the window, the glow in his eyes flickered. He could feel the power building inside him, a wave of energy surging through his veins. The force within him was not something he could fully control, not yet. But it was there, and it was only growing stronger. He could sense the cosmic forces that had once protected humanity, forces that had been dormant for centuries, slowly awakening. It wasn't just the power of the artifact. It was the power of the very universe itself responding to his return. Jake's hand gripped the edge of the windowsill, his mind racing. The universe was reacting, and it was doing so with fury. Something had changed, and it all centered around him. The death of a single human had set off a chain reaction, a cosmic alarm that was now ringing across the stars. He didn't know how or why, but he knew this. The Zereks had made a grave mistake. They thought they had silenced him, but in doing so, they had awakened something far greater than they could comprehend. With every passing second, the power inside him grew stronger. He could feel the universe pushing back, as if it was guiding him, urging him to rise. The Zereks thought they could erase humanity, that they could kill him and bury their secrets forever. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. Jake wasn't just a man anymore. He was something far more than that, a vessel for a power that had been waiting for the right moment to return. The glow in his eyes intensified. The energy around him seemed to bend and pulse with an intensity that made the very walls of the apartment shake. Somewhere far away, in the deep expanse of space, something was shifting. A great power was stirring. The gods of the universe, ancient beings who had once watched over humanity, were awakening from their slumber, sensing the disturbance caused by Jake's death and resurrection. In the silent depths of space, the Zerek fleet continued its mission, unaware of the cosmic forces now aligning against them. They believed they had secured their victory, that Earth was just another world to conquer. But the universe had other plans. Jake was more than just a human. He was a key, a force that had been waiting for the right time to rise again. And now, the universe was about to show the Zereks exactly what happened when they made a mistake. Jake's vision cleared, and he looked down at his hands. They were glowing, shimmering with a light that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the cosmos. He could feel the energy flowing through him, connecting him to the fabric of the universe itself. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing for certain. The Zereks had just awakened something they could never control. It wasn't just his life that had been restored. It was something far bigger. The universe had a message for them, one that they would soon learn the hard way. They had killed a human, and now they would feel the universe's furious response. The Zereks had no idea what they had done. Back in the cold command center of the Zerek Empire, the leaders of the coalition were celebrating what they thought was their victory. The human who had stumbled upon the ancient artifact was dead. The artifact was now in their possession. The mission had been a success, and the galaxy seemed safer because of it. But in the moments after Jake's death, something had begun to shift. The universe, vast and unknowable, had stirred. A cosmic force, one that even the Zereks had no understanding of, had been awakened. And with it, something was changing. The fabric of reality itself had been altered. Deep in the heart of Zerak space, in the highest echelons of the Empire, the first signs of disturbance began to appear. It started as a ripple, small, almost unnoticeable. A blip on the sensors of the Zerek ships. nothing to worry about at first. But as the moments passed, it grew stronger. Soon, entire fleets of Zerek warships were picking up strange signals. Ships, stations, and even entire colonies were experiencing random malfunctions. Weapons systems failed. Communications were interrupted. Ships that had once been impervious to attacks began to explode for no reason at all. Something was happening, and it was happening fast. The Zereks dismissed it as a glitch, perhaps a result of the ancient technology they had just recovered. But even they could sense something more. They had never experienced anything like this before. Across the galaxy, in distant sectors that no one had paid attention to in centuries, strange phenomena began to unfold. The gravitational pull of entire star systems shifted. Time seemed to warp in certain regions. Asteroids, once harmless, collided in patterns that should have been impossible. There was chaos, and it was spreading quickly. A galactic alarm was ringing, one that the Zereks didn't even know existed. They had triggered something vast, something ancient. At first, they ignored the signs. But as the disturbances grew, the Zereks were forced to send out emergency teams to investigate. What they discovered terrified them. In the deepest reaches of the galaxy, on a planet thought to be long dead, an ancient power began to awaken. The ruins of a once great civilization that had long been forgotten stirred, as though responding to the cosmic changes triggered by Jake's death. The Zereks had thought the humans were nothing more than insignificant pests, but now, with the death of one human, they had unleashed the very force that could change the fate of the universe. The Zerek leader, Vorak, sat in his command chair, staring at the vast expanse of space displayed before him. His mind was racing. What was happening? Why were the disturbances growing so rapidly? Why couldn't they contain the power that was now coursing through the galaxy? Then, just as Vorak began to consider his next move, the message came. It wasn't from any known species or civilization. It was a direct transmission, and it was only addressed to the Zereks. The message was clear and simple. Prepare for what is coming. The human you killed was not just a human. You have awakened something that cannot be stopped. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving a cold silence in its wake. Vorak's hand clenched into a fist as the weight of the message settled on him. There was no mistaking it. They had done something terrible, something they couldn't undo. But what exactly had they awakened? What had been sleeping for so long that even the Zereks, the most powerful empire in the galaxy, couldn't understand it? He turned to his command officers. Prepare for immediate action, he ordered, his voice cold. Mobilize the fleet. If we are to survive this, we need to find and destroy whatever this force is before it destroys us. But even as he gave the orders, Vorak couldn't shake the feeling that it was already too late. Whatever they had awakened was far beyond their control. Back on Earth, Jake had no idea what was happening beyond his small apartment. All he knew was that something had changed. The world outside his window looked the same, but he could feel it. The energy that flowed through him was unlike anything he could understand. It was as if the universe had suddenly aligned with him, as if he was now part of something far greater than himself. He had no explanation for it, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that the Zereks, who had taken his life, had no idea what was coming. Jake stood by the window, his hands shaking slightly as he stared out at the city below. His mind raced, trying to piece together everything that had happened, the artifact, the strange power inside him, and the Zerek's sudden violent intrusion into his life. He didn't know what the universe had in store for him now, but he knew one thing. The Zereks would pay. They had made a mistake, and they were going to regret it. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden, piercing noise. The ground beneath him trembled, and a low rumble echoed through the city. He looked outside again, his eyes narrowing. Something was wrong. The sky above seemed to flicker, as if reality itself was glitching. The air around him crackled with energy, and Jake felt the pulse of the universe echoing through him. He clenched his fists, his body filled with a strange, overwhelming power. It was as if the very stars themselves were calling to him, urging him to act. He knew that the Zereks were coming. They would come for him, thinking they could finish what they had started. But they didn't understand what they had awakened. They had thought they could wipe out one human and secure their empire. Instead, they had triggered something far beyond their understanding. And now, the universe was going to make sure they paid the price. The glow in Jake's eyes intensified, and the air around him hummed with energy. He could feel it. The ancient power, the forces that had been dormant for so long, were waking up. The universe was responding. It was angry. It was furious. And it was coming for the Zereks. The message was clear. Humanity was not just a footnote in the story of the universe. They were the key. And no one, not even the Zereks, could stop what was coming next. The Zereks were not prepared for what came next. As the disturbances spread across the galaxy, the once mighty empire found itself under siege from forces it couldn't begin to understand. Their fleet, which had been designed to conquer and dominate entire civilizations, was now caught in a cosmic storm, fighting against something far greater than any of their weapons or technology. The first signs of trouble had been dismissed as glitches. But now, whole sectors were losing contact, and entire fleets were being wiped out without warning. At the heart of the chaos, the Zerek leadership scrambled to regain control. The Council of High Command, a group of the Empire's most powerful figures, convened in an emergency meeting. Vorik, still reeling from the transmission that had warned them, stood at the head of the room, his mind racing with questions he couldn't answer. "We've been attacked," Vorik said, his voice sharp, his mind racing. "But not by any known enemy. The entire galaxy is shaking, and the human we killed, it's as if his death triggered something far worse." A senior officer, her face pale and tight with fear, spoke up. "The humans, they can't be responsible for all of this. They're too weak, too insignificant. We've controlled them for centuries." "That's what we thought," Vorik snapped. "But now, it seems we were wrong." He turned to the holographic display, showing the galaxy's star systems, now covered with red blinking lights indicating a growing instability in the fabric of space-time itself. "What we've unleashed is beyond anything we could have predicted." On the far side of the galaxy, a ripple in space distorted the fabric of time and space itself. An ancient energy source, long dormant, was now awakening. The energy didn't just travel through space. It reached across the cosmos, touching everything. It began to affect every life form, every system, and every piece of technology that came into contact with it. The Zereks, once the undisputed rulers of the galaxy, now found themselves struggling against something much older. This was not just an artifact. It was a key to the cosmic forces that had been watching over humanity since the beginning of time. The death of Jake had triggered the awakening of these ancient guardians. The humans weren't just survivors, they were destined to lead. And the galaxy, including the Zerek Empire, was about to learn the consequences of underestimating them. Jake's transformation was accelerating faster than he could understand. The energy inside him felt like an endless tide, rising higher with each passing moment. The air around him hummed, and the world seemed to shift, distorting as if reality itself was bending to the will of the power now flowing through his veins. He had no idea how to control it, but somehow he could feel the pulse of the universe in every fiber of his being. He could sense the Zerek ships gathering in the far reaches of space. Their fleets were preparing for an assault, convinced that they could still wipe him out. But what they didn't know was that they weren't just fighting a man. They were fighting an entire universe that had just been awakened to defend him. Jake didn't know how he knew these things, but the energy inside him was teaching him, guiding him. His thoughts raced as images of distant galaxies, alien civilizations, and ancient beings flooded his mind. He could feel the presence of the gods, the cosmic forces that had once protected humanity. They were stirring, responding to the Zerek's interference. The universe was angry, and it was coming for the ones who had dared to threaten it. Standing at the window, Jake felt his connection to the universe tighten. He closed his eyes, focusing. He could hear whispers in his mind, voices from the past, voices from the future. The Zerak's arrogance, their belief that they were untouchable, had triggered something that none of them could control. It wasn't just a simple weapon or technology they had unleashed. It was a force that existed long before their empire, and it would be their undoing. He clenched his fists, feeling the energy surge within him. "They've made a mistake," he muttered to himself. "They've awakened something they can't stop." The walls around him trembled as the energy inside him reached a critical point. His mind, now fully attuned to the forces of the universe, stretched out across the stars. He felt the Zerak fleets moving toward Earth, their weapons primed. But he wasn't afraid. He wasn't even sure if fear was something he could still feel. He raised his hands, and the air in the room seemed to crackle. The energy gathered around him, as though the very atmosphere had become a conduit for the cosmic forces now at his command. He wasn't alone. The universe was with him. The ancient guardians, the protectors of humanity, were awakening in full force. Far across the galaxy, the Zerak fleet moved closer to Earth, unaware of the storm that was about to descend upon them. Their ships were massive, an intimidating display of advanced technology, each one capable of destroying entire planets. But they were about to face something that their weapons could never counter. The Zerak soldiers on board their ships were nervous. The disturbances they had experienced over the last few days had made them uneasy. Weapon systems were malfunctioning. Communications were erratic. The once perfectly coordinated fleet now felt disjointed, as if some invisible force was pulling at the very fabric of their empire. Vorak stood on the bridge of the largest warship, his jaw clenched in frustration. The fleet was closing in on Earth, and they still had no idea what had caused the disruption in their systems. The entire galaxy seemed to be shaking, like an ancient beast had just stirred from a long slumber. But that beast wasn't sleeping anymore. It was awake, and it was coming for them. "Maintain formation," Vorak ordered, trying to keep his nerves in check. "Prepare to fire on Earth's atmosphere. This will end today." He had no idea how wrong he was. Back on Earth, Jake closed his eyes, focusing on the Zerak fleet now in position above the planet. The cosmic power inside him swelled, reaching a crescendo. He could feel the Zerak's presence, their ships hovering over the atmosphere, their weapons aimed at the planet. They were ready to destroy him, to finish what they had started. But they had no idea what was coming. The universe had answered. Jake was no longer a mere human. He was a vessel for something far greater. With a single thought, he sent out a pulse of energy that spread across the planet like a shockwave. The ground trembled, the skies crackled with lightning, and the stars themselves seemed to blink in recognition. The Zerak fleet, so confident in their power, suddenly faltered. Weapons systems shut down. Ships lost control. They tried to fire on Earth, but their guns failed to respond. Panic spread across their lines as the very laws of physics seemed to break down around them. The Zeraks were trapped in a storm of energy they could neither understand nor control. Jake's voice rang out, though he never spoke a word aloud. His thoughts, amplified by the ancient power inside him, echoed across space. "This is not your galaxy. You were never meant to control it. You have awakened a force you cannot stop." The Zerak fleet, once so mighty, now stood paralyzed. The universe had spoken, and the response was swift, furious, and unstoppable. The Zerak fleet was paralyzed, caught in a cosmic storm of energy that they could not begin to comprehend. Their massive warships floated motionless above Earth, their systems flickering and malfunctioning, their weapons rendered useless. Panic spread among the soldiers aboard the ships as their once pristine technology failed them in the face of something far greater than they had ever anticipated. In the command center of the lead Zerak warship, Vorak stood at the helm, his hands clenched in frustration. The walls of the bridge trembled as the force from below intensified. He could feel the tremors ripple through the ship's hull, as though the very core of the galaxy was rejecting their presence. The voices of his officers echoed with fear and confusion, all trying to make sense of the unnatural disturbances. "Captain," one of the officers shouted, their voice panicked. "Weapons are offline. Engines are failing. The whole fleet, it's being pulled apart." Vorik's mind raced. This was no simple interference, no malfunction. This was something deliberate, something powerful, and it was connected to the human they had killed, Jake. The human whose death had triggered the cosmic force that was now bearing down on them. They had underestimated Earth. They had underestimated humanity. And now, they were paying the price. "What is happening?" Vorik growled, his voice a low growl of frustration and fear. His eyes darted between his officers, desperate for some kind of explanation. But no one had answers. In the vast emptiness of space, beyond Earth, the energy grew stronger. The universe itself seemed to be folding in on the Zerek ships, creating a wall of unimaginable force. No longer were the laws of space and time bending. They were breaking. What the Zereks had done wasn't just a threat to Jake or Earth. It was a threat to the very balance of the galaxy itself. The death of one human had awakened something primal, something beyond their understanding. And now, that force was coming for them. Back on Earth, Jake felt the power surge through him like an unstoppable tide. It wasn't just within him anymore. It was around him. His entire being had become a conduit for the forces of the universe, drawing energy from the stars themselves. The Zerek's presence above the planet was a tangible thing now, something Jake could feel with every breath he took. He was connected to the universe. He was connected to Earth. And he was connected to the ancient beings who had been watching over humanity since the beginning of time. Jake closed his eyes, focusing on the energy that surrounded him. He could feel the Zerek ships, suspended in the atmosphere, trapped by the power he had awakened. He could feel the tension in their systems, their fear. The universe was responding to them, but Jake knew it wasn't just about vengeance. It was about something greater, balance. The Zereks had overstepped. They had awakened forces they could not control, and now the universe was retaliating. The balance had been disturbed, and it was Jake who had been chosen to restore it. He opened his eyes. The glow within them intensified, a brilliant light that seemed to reflect the stars themselves. His hands extended outward, and with a simple thought, the energy around him twisted and churned. The Zerek fleet, suspended above Earth, trembled. Jake was not just an individual anymore. He was the universe's response, the living embodiment of cosmic justice. The Zerek ships began to move on their own. They rocked and swayed in the atmosphere, their hulls groaning as if they were being manipulated by some invisible force. The soldiers on board screamed, trying to regain control, but it was hopeless. They were no longer in charge. They were nothing more than helpless passengers in a ship that was being pulled toward a reckoning. Jake felt a surge of power coursing through him. He had only begun to tap into the full extent of the energy that flowed through him, but already he could sense the fear of the Zereks. They had thought they were invincible, that they could wipe out humanity without consequence. Now they were paying the price for their arrogance. In a flash, Jake's energy expanded, reaching out toward the fleet. The Zerek ships were drawn closer to Earth, their movements no longer their own. The ships groaned under the immense pressure, as if the very fabric of space was bending around them. Jake was exerting his will, using the force within him to control the entire fleet. One by one, the Zerek ships fell into disarray. Their weapon systems continued to malfunction, their hulls shaking, their engines sputtering. They were being pulled, not by any physical force, but by the unseen hand of the universe itself. The energy around Jake surged higher, brighter. He was no longer just fighting for his own survival. He was fighting for humanity, for the balance of the cosmos. And the Zereks were the ones who would pay the price. At the heart of the Zerek fleet, Vorik watched in disbelief as his warships were drawn closer to Earth. The universe itself seemed to be warping around them, distorting their systems, rendering them useless. The once mighty ships, which had been designed to strike fear into every corner of the galaxy, were now being dragged toward the planet by an invisible force. "What is this?" Vorik's voice trembled, his hands gripping the command chair in disbelief. How are we losing control?" "Sir," one of the officers called out, their voice shaky. "We've lost all systems. The ships, they're being pulled in by something we can't explain." Vorik's mind raced. He knew they had made a mistake, but this was beyond anything he had ever imagined. The universe itself was retaliating, and now the Zeraks were helpless before it. In desperation, Vorik shouted, "Activate the emergency shields. Do it now." But it was too late. The ships groaned under the pressure, their shields flickering weakly before collapsing entirely. The once impenetrable Zerak technology was no match for the cosmic force that had been awakened. The fleet, the pride of the Zerak Empire, was now at the mercy of a power far greater than their empire could ever hope to control. One by one, the ships began to fall, not to the might of Zerak weaponry or technology, but to the unstoppable force of the universe itself. Jake had become the universe's response to their arrogance, and there was no escape. Jake stood in the center of the storm he had created, watching as the Zerak fleet was dragged toward Earth. The energy inside him had reached its peak, and he could feel the entire planet vibrating with the power of the universe. His hands were extended outward, his fingers crackling with cosmic energy. The Zerak ships were almost within reach now, their hulls flickering, their systems failing. Jake could feel the weight of the universe pressing in around him, but he didn't flinch. He was no longer just a human. He was the embodiment of cosmic justice, and the Zeraks had broken the law of the universe. The final ship, the flagship, was the last to falter. Its massive form shook violently as it was drawn down into the atmosphere. Jake's thoughts were clear, focused. He could feel the fleet's destruction as it unfolded before him. The Zerak Empire, once so sure of its dominance, was now crumbling before his will. With a final push, Jake sent the last of the ships hurtling toward the surface. It would crash, but not in destruction. It would crash as a reminder, as a symbol of the universe's fury. The Zeraks had overestimated themselves, and now they would pay. The battle was over, and humanity, through Jake, had claimed its place in the cosmos. The Zerak flagship crashed into the Earth with a deafening roar, its impact sending shockwaves through the atmosphere. The air shimmered as the force of the crash radiated out, tearing apart everything in its wake. The ground buckled beneath it, the shockwave ripping through nearby buildings, sending debris flying into the sky. Yet, as the smoke and dust began to settle, a strange calm descended over the battlefield. The Earth had been shaken, but it was still standing. Jake stood at the center of the storm, his body radiating energy, his hands still extended, his mind focused. His heart raced, not from fear or anger, but from the realization of what had just happened. The universe had answered, and it had given him the power to reshape the fate of not just Earth, but of the entire galaxy. He could feel it all. The Zerak fleet, broken and in ruin, was now nothing more than a memory of their arrogance. Their ships, once the pride of their empire, were now nothing more than smoldering husks. But Jake didn't feel joy in their destruction. What he felt was something much deeper, a connection to the universe, to the forces that had awakened in response to the Zerak's mistake. He closed his eyes, letting the energy within him ebb and flow. The universe's power, which had once been a chaotic storm, now seemed to settle into a steady hum, a cosmic heartbeat. He was no longer just Jake, the human who had stumbled upon an ancient artifact. He was the universe's messenger, a force of nature sent to restore balance where it had been disrupted. The Zeraks had made the mistake of thinking they could control the galaxy, of believing that humanity was weak and expendable, but they had underestimated everything. The resilience of Earth, the power of the ancient artifact, and the vast, invisible force that had always been watching over humanity. Jake's return had triggered the awakening of something far beyond the reach of the Xereks, and now the universe had delivered its judgment. On the surface of the planet, the devastation was immense. The city had been shattered by the crash of the Xerek flagship, and the remnants of the other warships smoldered in the distance. Yet, amid the ruin, humanity stood resolute. People from all corners of the globe had witnessed the events unfold, through broadcasts, through emergency feeds, through their own eyes. What had seemed like a doomed fight against an unstoppable enemy was now a moment of triumph. And it was Jake who had made it happen. He didn't understand it all. He didn't fully know what his role was in this vast cosmic play, but he could feel it. He could feel the weight of destiny pressing on him. And as he looked over the ruined city, the quiet settling over the earth like a blanket, he knew one thing for certain. The universe had changed. Humanity had changed. But there was more to do. The Xereks were defeated, yes, but they were not the only threat in the universe. Jake could sense the lingering presence of ancient powers, beings who had watched over the stars, who had shaped the course of history. He could feel the echoes of their voices in the distance, just out of reach, as if they were waiting for him to make the next move. He closed his eyes and reached out with his mind, feeling the stars, the planets, the very fabric of space around him. His power had only begun to tap into the cosmic force that flowed through him. The Xereks had been the first to feel it, but they wouldn't be the last. The universe had a purpose for him, but Jake had to find it. He had to understand what it meant to be the vessel for this power, and what role humanity would play in the galaxy that was now opening up before them. The Xereks had made the mistake of thinking the universe was theirs to conquer, but it wasn't. It never had been. The universe had always belonged to something else, the human spirit. And now Jake was the symbol of that spirit, a force of nature that would bring balance back to the cosmos. Meanwhile, far from Earth, deep in the Xerek Empire, the Council of High Command sat in stunned silence. They had lost everything. Their fleet, once unstoppable, had been reduced to rubble. Their ships, their soldiers, their very way of life were now in ruins. And it was all because of one human, Jake. Vorik stood before his fellow commanders, his once proud posture now slumped with the weight of their defeat. The council chamber was silent, filled with a sense of disbelief, as though no one could truly accept what had just transpired. "We were warned," Vorik muttered, his voice hoarse. "We were warned that this human was more than we understood, but we chose to ignore it." He turned to one of the officers, his voice now a harsh whisper. "What do we do now? The fleets are gone. The artifact is lost. We have no power left." The officer looked up, his face pale. We don't know. There are whispers in the outer regions. The human's power. It's not just on Earth. It's spreading. We've lost contact with our outposts across the galaxy. The galaxy is shifting." Vorik slammed his fist down on the table, his frustration palpable. "What do you mean, shifting? We've lost the war, but the galaxy cannot change overnight. The human is one man, one insignificant, flawed being. How can he change everything?" The officer hesitated, then spoke, fear creeping into his voice. "It's not just him. It's the force inside him. We've never seen anything like it. The Xerek gods are silent. The artifacts we've collected, they are now dormant, and the universe itself is responding." Vorik felt a chill run through him. The power that the Xereks had sought to control, the power they had tried to suppress, was no longer under their control. The universe itself had chosen its protector, and it was humanity. Earth. Jake. The Xerek Empire had been the most advanced civilization in the galaxy, but they were now nothing more than a shadow of their former self, lost in the wake of the human spirit. Back on Earth, Jake stood at the edge of the ruined city, his face expressionless as the wind blew across the desolation. His power was still growing, still evolving, but he could feel the weight of the task ahead of him. He wasn't just the protector of Earth anymore. He was the protector of something far greater. He reached out again, his mind stretching across the stars, feeling the pulse of the universe echoing in his veins. The universe was vast, and there were many threats out there. The Zeraks were just the beginning. The ancient forces, the cosmic guardians, were watching him, and Jake knew that soon he would have to face them. But he was ready. The universe had chosen humanity, and he had become its champion. Jake had died once before, but now he was something else. He was the universe's fury, the embodiment of balance, and the protector of Earth. And the galaxy would soon learn what happens when it tried to take humanity's future away. Ake stood alone in the vast expanse of the ruined city, the silence around him deafening. The Zerak fleet was no more, their once mighty ships now reduced to wreckage, their commanders scattered and broken. The energy within him still hummed with power, an almost overwhelming sensation that pulsed through his veins. But as much as he had achieved, as much as he had done, the battle was not truly over. The Zeraks were just the first to face the wrath of the universe, but they wouldn't be the last. The balance had shifted. The galaxy had changed, and Jake knew that his journey was far from finished. The universe had awakened to its full fury, but that fury wasn't confined to Earth. It was vast, endless, and it would not rest until the cosmic order was restored. The galaxy had felt the earthquake of his power, but there were still ancient forces out there, forces that had been dormant for eons, waiting for the right moment to act. Jake looked up at the sky, feeling the weight of the stars pressing down on him. He was no longer just a man. He had become something more, a living force of the universe. But even with the strength that now flowed through him, he knew that there were still unknown dangers lurking in the dark corners of space, hidden from sight. His connection to the cosmic energies had granted him power beyond comprehension, but it had also burdened him with responsibility beyond anything he had ever imagined. The sky above Earth was clear now, but Jake could feel the pulse of distant stars and dying suns, the flicker of ancient powers awakening in far-off corners of the universe. The Zeraks had awakened something when they killed him, a force of nature that could no longer be stopped. And now, that force was drawing attention from all over the galaxy. Jake closed his eyes, summoning the cosmic energy that flowed through him. He felt the ripples of the galaxy, felt the stirrings of the beings who had watched over Earth for so long. The ancient guardians, the forgotten gods of the cosmos, were coming alive, and some of them would not be happy about humanity's rise. He sensed the tension growing, the universe itself seeming to brace for what was coming. There were forces in the galaxy, older and far more powerful than anything the Zeraks had ever encountered. They were aware of Jake now, and they were watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Across the galaxy, in the cold, distant reaches of space, a council of ancient beings convened. These beings were not gods in the traditional sense, at least, not in the way the Zeraks had believed. They were the architects of the universe, the silent forces who had shaped the galaxies since time itself began. Their existence was not bound by flesh or blood. They were energy, thought, and will, taking forms only when necessary. And they were beginning to stir. One of the ancient beings, an entity of pure energy known as Icarus, observed the events unfolding on Earth. It had watched as Jake's power grew, as humanity's potential awakened. It had been silent for eons, waiting for the right moment to intervene. Now, that moment had arrived. This human, Icarus mused, its voice echoing in the minds of the other ancient beings, has become something far more than he was. The death of one human triggered something immense, something we had not foreseen. Another ancient being, a cold, calculating entity known as Alvara, responded. The humans were never meant to play such a role in the universe's design. They are insignificant in the grand scheme of things. Why should we concern ourselves with their fate? Icarus's voice was firm. Because the universe itself has chosen them. The energy that the Zeraks unleashed when they killed Jake is beyond our control. It is a force that we cannot simply ignore. The balance has been disturbed, and if we do not address it, the consequences will be dire. We have watched this galaxy for millennia. A third being, Rathar, added, its voice a soft whisper like a breeze in the void. Perhaps it is time to allow change. But if this human becomes too powerful, he could alter the fabric of the universe itself. The council was divided. Some saw Jake as a threat, a potential harbinger of destruction. Others, like Icarus, believed that humanity's rise was inevitable and that they had been chosen by the forces of the universe itself. But none of them could deny that something had changed. The Zerek's arrogance had set in motion a series of events that no one could predict. The galaxy was teetering on the edge of something much larger than anyone had ever anticipated. Back on Earth, Jake continued to feel the pulse of the universe coursing through him. The cosmic energy was both exhilarating and overwhelming. He could sense the ancient beings, the gods, watching from afar, their eyes fixed on him. He could feel their presence like a faint whisper at the edge of his mind, but they were far too distant to reach directly. Not yet. Jake turned away from the city, where life was slowly beginning to rebuild in the aftermath of the destruction. The people of Earth had witnessed the fall of the Zerek Empire. They had seen their world torn apart, only to be saved by a single human. Now they would begin to realize what had truly happened, that the universe had chosen them. And with that realization would come a new understanding of humanity's place in the galaxy. But Jake knew that the road ahead was not going to be easy. The ancient guardians would not simply allow him to wield the universe's power without question. They would challenge him, test him, perhaps even try to control him. He was not a god. He was a man, caught in the middle of a war that he barely understood. But what Jake did understand was this. The Zereks had been the first, but they would not be the last to challenge humanity. The galaxy was vast, filled with unknown forces, some hostile, some indifferent, and some perhaps willing to join in the fight. Jake's role in this new cosmic order was not yet clear, but one thing was certain. The universe would never be the same. At that moment, a transmission came through, breaking the silence. It wasn't from Earth. It was from deep space, an unknown signal, encrypted with ancient codes. Jake immediately felt its weight, the urgency of it. He reached out with his mind, tapping into the power that flowed through him. The transmission seemed to come from the edge of the galaxy, a place so far from Earth that even his enhanced senses had trouble reaching it. But it was there, and it was calling to him. With a thought, he opened the communication, and the image of a figure appeared before him, floating in the space between worlds. The being was translucent, shifting like light caught in the wind. Its voice was ancient, a sound like the ringing of a bell across the void. Jake, the being spoke, its voice resonating with power. The time has come to face the consequences of your actions. The Zereks were but the beginning. You have awakened forces that will challenge not only your world but the entire galaxy. Come, we are waiting. Jake's heart skipped a beat. He knew that voice. It was one of the ancient beings, the guardians who had protected Earth for millennia. But now, they were calling him. The universe had awakened, and Jake, humanity's champion, was about to step into a new era, one where the choices he made would shape the very future of the stars.